Are Republicans blinking first, or is it the president? Is a new proposal on the budget impasse a compromise or a cave-in? This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Bret Baier. We have spent much of the last 10 days trying to figure out which side has the better hand in this high-stakes game of political poker that has shut down some of the government and fueled worries about a possible default. Until today, neither side was showing its cards, and now Republicans appear to have put in an opening bid. And it's up to President Obama and the Democrats to figure out if they're all in. But word just moments ago that the House Speaker John Boehner left the White House without talking to reporters. So what now? Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry has tonight's top story.
For the first time in this standoff, there were finally some glimmers of progress as Senate Democrats met for an hour and a half with President Obama and emerged to suggest they're inching closer to a deal with House Republicans.
When they send us something, we'll look at it as clearly and as closely as we can.
Then a small group of House Republican negotiators arrived with that something for the president, just hours after Speaker John Boehner unveiled the proposal to mixed reaction from conservatives. The plan would give the president a 6-week extension of the debt ceiling that would push potential default back until November 22nd, right before Thanksgiving. And conferees from both parties would be appointed to try and work out a broader budget package if the president agrees to sit and talk about spending cuts and perhaps tax reform as part of a deal to get the government back open.
It's time for leadership. It's time for these negotiations and this conversation to begin. And I would hope that the president will look at this as an opportunity and a good faith effort on our part to move halfway.
Halfway, though, means Boehner is giving the president a clean extension of the debt ceiling, but is not opening the government without conditions. Nonetheless, the White House seems eager for at least a partial deal. So White House spokesman Jay Carney offered encouraging words designed perhaps to soothe the markets. And indeed, the Dow soared by over 300 points on speculation of a potential deal.
The president is happy that cooler heads at least seem to be prevailing in the House, that there at least seems to be a recognition that default is not an option.
Yet there are still huge roadblocks, starting with whether Boehner can get enough votes from his right flank to raise the debt ceiling without any strings, which would be a cave. Then there are conservatives who are willing to give on the debt ceiling, but are taking a hard line on health care changes as a condition for reopening the government.
We're saying we'll give him a clean debt ceiling for 6 weeks so he can negotiate on the issues dealing with the debt. But when it comes to the continuing resolution, when it comes to the issues dealing with Obamacare, we're going to continue to hold our ground.
And there seems to be a split among Democrats about whether to accept just a debt ceiling hike without immediately opening the government. That would be a cave for the president, who's repeatedly insisted he would not negotiate on either matter. Yet Carney signaled today the president would sign a short-term debt ceiling hike and was cagey on what would come next.
What he has said is that Congress needs to do both. If it does one, that's a good thing, but he will still insist that they do the other.
Yet after the president's meeting with Senate Democrats, Harry Reid said he will not enter budget talks if only the debt ceiling is taken care of.
Not going to happen.
Now, Reid added, open up the government and increase the debt ceiling, and then Democrats will negotiate on anything. The question is, if Boehner just does one in the debt ceiling, could the president enter into not a negotiation but a conversation or something like that, some other nuance about reopening the government? The bottom line is Speaker Boehner, as well as the rest of the Republican team, just left the White House without talking to reporters. So clearly no deal tonight, but Senate Republicans, we should point out, are coming over tomorrow, Brett.
Yeah, and just quickly, the fact that Boehner left without talking to reporters is pretty significant. I mean, usually they go to those microphones.
Right, because they want to get momentum for a deal. You saw the markets thinking and cheering a potential deal. If Boehner had some progress from this meeting, he would have come to those microphones and said, we're this close, we're getting closer. Instead, he's got to go back to his fellow Republicans and try to sell wherever they are right now, Brett.
Okay, Ed Henry live on the North Lawn. Ed, thank you. As Ed mentioned, stocks surged on the prospect of a mini deal or the prospect that anything was moving forward in Washington. The Dow had a monster day, gaining 323, the most in almost 2 years. The S&P 500 was up 36. The Nasdaq gained 83. This afternoon, the Senate passed a measure to restore death benefits to military families. But there are still questions tonight about what the president knew and when he knew it regarding the suspension of those funds because of the government shutdown. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin has the latest from the Pentagon.
after the Defense Department announced it had accepted the offer from the charity Fisher House to pay death benefits to military families during the shutdown. The finger-pointing continued in Washington.
I was shocked and angered when I learned that 5 of our nation's heroes died in Afghanistan over the weekend, and their families were informed that benefits could not be paid.
House Republicans say the law they authored and the president signed into law the day before the shutdown gave the Pentagon all the authority it needed to pay death benefits.
You really, I think, subordinated your responsibilities, I think, to achieve a political objective. And the political objective was to inflict as much harm as you possibly could in your own department. You've compounded the problem by your conduct in how you've misinterpreted intentionally this law.
I resent your remarks, and let the record show that. I acted on the advice of attorneys and our best reading of a loosely worded law, and we did our best.
Mr. Chairman,
and it was not, let me finish, please. It was not a political judgment.
The Senate today quickly moved to pass a new House bill to eliminate the confusion and explicitly pay death benefits during the shutdown. The act passed unanimously despite promises from Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid not to consider piecemeal spending bills.
This whole thing is for show. This whole government shutdown is for show.
The White House suggested the president may not sign it since Fisher House is willing to foot the bill for now.
First of all, the legislation is not necessary. Our view has been that this piecemeal funding is, again, a gimmick.
Congressional aides privately admit the original Pay Our Military Act was hastily written and vague. Republicans accuse the Pentagon of not enforcing the spirit of the law. Not so, Pentagon Comptroller Robert Hale told Congress today.
During the lapse, DOD has no legal authority to pay death gratuities. We've been through this with the Justice Department, with the OMB General Counsel, with our own General Counsel. It's in another section of the law, separate from pay and allowances. We just don't have the legal authority, and I don't think you want us to start going around the law.
The White House continued to avoid directly answering when the president first learned about the problem.
In his evening walk with Chief of Staff Dennis McDonough on Tuesday, the president raised the concern about death benefits not being paid to deserving families. The president directed Mr. McDonough to get creative and get it solved within 24 hours.
It is still not clear whether the president intends to sign the law passed by the Senate today. Since yesterday, 3 more U.S. service members died, and Fisher House is still on the hook to pay 29 families. Brett.
Jennifer Griffin live at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thank you. The Obama administration says it will allow states to use their own money to reopen some national parks closed by the shutdown. The top officials of one Tennessee community are going out of their way to try to salvage their biggest economic month of the year. But correspondent Jonathan Serry reports so far Uncle Sam isn't buying it, even though it's free.
With no end in sight to the government shutdown, the mayor of Blount County, Tennessee, offered local resources to keep open parts of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park at no cost to the feds.
We would have been able to patrol the roads. We would have been able to fix the roads if trees fell. Emergency services, we had the Townsend Volunteer Fire Department that was committed to respond.
Mayor Ed Mitchell says the park closure hurts nearby businesses and blocks school bus access to children in a small mountain community called Top of the World because secondary roads are too rugged. In a general statement, the National Park Service said it appreciates but cannot accept local offers to manage operations during the shutdown. A Park Service spokesman writes, beyond the legal constraints involved, it would not be appropriate or feasible to open some parks or some parts of parks while other parts of the national park system remain closed to the public.
What about anything on the road that goes over to Syracuse? Do you stop it?
There are a number of pullouts. You're welcome to pull over.
Park gates remain closed to vehicle traffic. However, rangers have been allowing visitors to enter some areas on foot. Kentucky school bus driver Paul Cave and his wife Brenda say their shorter than usual visit to the park was fun, but they're eager for politicians in Washington to end the budget standoff. standoff.
I would like to see that they would be able where they could get along better than a bunch of kids up there. Because, like I say, I drive a school bus and haul kids, and that's kind of what they remind me of up there.
Let's compromise a little bit.
October is normally the second busiest month for the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, which attracts more than 9 million visitors a year. But with the park closed, nearby communities fear many of their regular visitors will stay home. Brett?
Jonathan, thank you. Up next, looking for ways around Obamacare. But first, here's what some of our Fox affiliates across the country are covering tonight. Fox 5 in Atlanta with how thousands are getting behind the effort to find a 5-month-old baby a new heart. Baby Silas's father is part of the Grammy Award-winning Christian group Casting Crowns. Fox 7 in Austin, Texas with serious safety violations at the fertilizer plant that exploded in April, killing 15 people. And this is a live look at Phoenix from KSAZ. The big story there tonight, the weather. It's in the 60s. Way too cold for this time of year out there in Phoenix. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.